I thought I was just dealing with a greedy landlord. After all, he kept my deposit and handed me back pennies like I should be grateful. But what he didn't expect was how fast word spreads in a high-rise full of retired men and gossipy neighbors. He wanted to pocket a month and a half of my rent. Instead, he ended up losing a full year's income, his reputation, and the last bit of respect anyone had for him. Greed makes a man blind, and that blindness cost him far more than he stole from me. For more than 10 years, I lived in the same high-rise apartment building. 20 floors, thin walls, noisy pipes, but I had learned to live with it. My landlord was a peculiar man. He lived right next door to me, but might as well have been living in another country. Cold, detached, never smiled unless money was involved. But we had an understanding, and for years, it worked out fine. The deal was simple. Don't bother him unless the place was literally on fire. If the shower broke, I replaced it. If the fridge died, I bought a new one, knocked it off the rent, and nobody argued. It was the kind of silent contract older men actually respect: self-sufficiency, no whining, no endless negotiations. That was why I stayed so long. Then, like most problems in life, greed came knocking. His wife decided they could get more money by turning the apartment into an office. Never mind that it was illegal. Never mind that I'd been a reliable tenant for a decade. Suddenly, they wanted me out. Fast. I wasn't unreasonable. I agreed to leave a month early, as long as they gave me my deposit back and returned the last month's rent I had already paid. On paper, fair deal. In reality, it was the start of a circus. The moment I handed over the keys, they flipped. "The place is ruined," they said. My cats had scratched the leather on a dining chair leg. A pull-up bar had left 2 dents in the kitchen doorframe. They pointed at a chipped tile like it was the Great Wall crumbling. Even the holes from hanging a picture frame were suddenly a major issue. I worked long hours, but I still played along. I paid to re-leather the chair legs. I patched the wall where the frame had been. I even fixed a window screen, even though it was in better shape than when I moved in. I did all this because I trusted that after 10 years, they would act like adults. When it came time to settle, I was supposed to walk away with about 24,000 renminbi, roughly 2,500 pounds. Instead, he shoved 5,000 into my hand and said, "Take it or leave it. Otherwise, you get nothing." I'll never forget how smug he looked, like he had played me. I should have been furious. But what he didn't realize was that I didn't need to fight him in court. In this building, reputation is worth more than contracts. And once the neighbors found out what he had done, he wouldn't be able to buy back his dignity with all the rent money in the world. The day I walked out of that apartment with nothing but 5,000 in my pocket, I knew I had been robbed. Not by a thief in the night, but by a landlord with a smirk and a pen. He had promised me 24,000, my deposit and the month's rent I was owed, and then decided I wasn't worth the paper we had agreed on. I could have argued. I could have shouted, threatened, maybe even called a lawyer. But he sat there calm, repeating the same line. "If you don't accept the 5, you get nothing at all." It wasn't just the words. It was the arrogance dripping from his voice. He believed I had no choice. And maybe in that moment, I didn't. I took the money, left, and carried my frustration down 20 flights of stairs. Normally, I kept to myself in that building. Men of my generation don't gossip, don't complain, don't get tangled in other people's drama. But anger has a way of loosening the tongue. I ran into one of the older ladies in the lobby, someone who seemed to know everything about everyone. She asked me why I looked so sour. I told her, not in detail, just enough to let her know the landlord had cheated me out of most of my money. Her eyes lit up like she had been waiting for this kind of story. She leaned closer, almost whispering, "Oh, people will want to hear about this." I shrugged it off at first. I didn't care for building politics. But within a week, I started noticing the change. The landlord's wife, who used to strut around leading the mother's group, suddenly found herself sitting alone. Conversations that once included her stopped mid-sentence when she walked by. Neighbors who had smiled at him now looked the other way. The building was alive with whispers, and I had become the spark that set off the fire. It was ironic. He thought he had won by pocketing my deposit. In reality, he had traded cash for reputation. And reputation, in a high-rise where 500 people share walls and hallways, is worth far more than a handful of bills. The funniest part? I had told him I was leaving the city. But life had other plans. I stayed. I found another apartment in the very same building. So instead of disappearing, I became his neighbor again, a constant reminder of the man he had cheated. Every time he stepped out of his door, he had to see me. Every time he passed through the lobby, he had to feel the stares of neighbors who now knew his little secret. He had thought it was over when he pushed that envelope of money across the table. He didn't realize it was only the beginning. At first, I thought it was just me. One unlucky tenant, taken advantage of after a decade of loyalty. I figured the landlord would move on, pocket my money, and forget I ever existed. But life in a building that size doesn't let secrets stay buried for long. A year later, I got a call from the office about a minor question, something about the floor heating system. Out of habit, I went over to check it out. When I walked inside my old place, I couldn't believe my eyes. The dents from my pull-up bar were still there, untouched. The same scratches I had supposedly cost him thousands to repair stared right back at me. That moment hit like a punch in the gut. He hadn't fixed a thing. Not the tile, not the door frame, not the walls. He had taken my deposit, claimed he needed it for repairs, and done absolutely nothing. My money hadn't gone to the apartment. It had gone straight into his pocket. I confronted him in the hallway, half expecting him to at least offer some excuse. Instead, he waved me off with a smirk. Mind your own business. That phrase told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about damage. It wasn't about responsibility. It was about greed, pure and simple. I started paying more attention after that. And that's when the stories began to surface. Another tenant mentioned how she never saw her deposit back either. A young couple complained about being charged for new window screens, even though the ones they left behind were brand new. Bit by bit, it became clear I wasn't alone. The gossip that had once isolated his wife was now turning into a pattern, a collection of testimonies. People whispered about being nickel and dimed, about losing thousands, about promises that never materialized. At first, I thought it was exaggeration. But then I remembered my own experience. The dents, still in the wood. The same walls, unpainted. And suddenly, their complaints sounded less like gossip and more like truth. I realized then that he hadn't just robbed me. He had been running the same game on everyone. Keeping deposits, inventing damage, and counting on people to be too tired or too busy to fight him. The realization lit a slow-burning fire inside me. He hadn't outsmarted me. He had been lazy, too lazy to even cover his tracks. And if he was doing this to multiple tenants, sooner or later, someone was going to snap. I didn't know when or how, but I had the sense that this story wasn't over. A man can only cheat so many people before his luck runs out. And when it did, I wanted a front row seat. It was 5 years after I moved out when the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. I wasn't even thinking about the landlord anymore. Life had moved on. Work had kept me busy. And though I still carried the bitterness of losing my deposit, it wasn't something I thought about every day. Until one night, around 3 in the morning, I noticed a strange glow down the hall. The light in my old apartment was on. That didn't make sense. The place was supposed to be rented out as an office. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over, expecting to find maybe a cleaning crew or some late-night workers. Instead, I found the door wide open. The sight inside was unforgettable. The apartment looked like it had been through a storm. Cabinets broken, trash everywhere, words scrawled on the walls in thick marker, lazy landlord. I stepped closer, and there they were, the dents in the kitchen door frame, still exactly as I had left them. 5 years later, untouched. That was the confirmation I needed. He had lied, plain and simple. Not only had he pocketed my deposit, but he hadn't spent a single cent on fixing the place. The same dents, the same scratches, the same chipped tile. Everything he claimed had drained my money was still right there. I pulled out my phone, took photos, and posted them straight into the building's group chat. By then, everyone in the high-rise was connected, nearly 500 residents in one thread. And the reaction was immediate. Dozens of people chimed in. He kept our deposit too. He charged us for cleaning that was never done. We had to replace things ourselves, and he never reimbursed us. It was like opening floodgates. Suddenly, the quiet suspicion turned into a tidal wave of shared anger. People uploaded their own pictures, leaky trash bags left outside their doors, cigarette butts in the hallways, even videos of tenants screaming foul language in front of children because the landlord never enforced rules. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just gossip. It was a pattern, and now the whole building could see it laid out in black and white. And then came the real shock. The police were called. Not by me, by other tenants who had finally had enough. Complaints piled up, and for the first time, the landlord's smug little empire started to crumble. Standing there, reading those furious messages, I realized the scope of what he had done. He had stolen not just my deposit, but everyone's trust. And the price for that was finally coming due. I had thought losing my money was the end of the story. But this was just the beginning of his downfall. The fallout came faster than I expected. One moment, the group chat was full of angry tenants sharing photos and stories. The next, building management was forced to step in. They couldn't ignore it anymore. Too many voices. Too much proof. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had connected the dots. Other tenants had kept receipts, messages, and even voice recordings of conversations with the landlord. When they compared notes, the picture was ugly. Deposits taken, repairs invented, and promises never kept. Then came the official word. The landlord was hit with multiple fines, not just for cheating tenants, but for everything he had tried to sweep under the rug. Public disturbance, degrading the quality of the living space, and worst of all, illegally renting a residence as an office. Each violation carried weight, and together, they stacked into a heavy financial punch. I still remember the day the notice went up in the lobby. A big red stamp, the kind that makes everyone stop and read. His name, the charges, the penalties. People whispered, shook their heads, even laughed. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was official. His reputation wasn't just tarnished, it was ruined. But the most brutal part wasn't the fines. It was what came after. Building management refused to grant him permission to bring in workers to fix the place. No repairs, no renovations, nothing. That apartment sat empty, its walls still marked with insults, its doorframe still dented from my pull-up bar, for more than 6 months. Think about it. He stole a month and a half's rent from me. And in return, he lost half a year's worth of income, maybe more. The numbers didn't lie. He thought he was clever, cutting corners and pocketing deposits. In reality, he was bleeding money, all because he couldn't resist squeezing a little extra out of people who had trusted him. The revelation hit the whole building like a wave. Neighbors who had once shrugged off their own bad experiences suddenly realized they weren't alone. We had all been played by the same man. And now, watching him stumble, there was a sense of grim satisfaction. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Seeing him walk through the lobby with his head down, no one greeting him, no one offering even the courtesy of a nod, that was enough. For a man who had lived off appearances, being shunned by his own community was the harshest punishment possible. He had wanted to save face by cheating me. Instead, he lost everything that gave him face in the first place. And the best part? All I had done was tell the truth. The rest, the building itself took care of. After the fines hit and the apartment sat empty, I found myself in a strange position. On one hand, I had every reason to feel vindicated. He had stolen from me, and now he was paying the price 100 times over. Justice, in its rawest form. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding the steering wheel of something much bigger than me. Every time I passed by that unit, its door half open, its insides trashed and unlivable, I felt the urge to take another picture, to post another update. The building group chat was like dry tinder. All it needed was a spark, and suddenly, the fire was roaring again. People wanted more dirt. They wanted to keep exposing him, keep shaming him. And I had the perfect vantage point to provide it. But there was a part of me that hesitated. I'm not the kind of man who lives for drama. I grew up in a time when men solved problems quietly. A handshake, a stern word, sometimes a hard look was enough. Feeding gossip, even if it was justified, didn't sit right with me. Was I crossing a line? Or was I simply giving people the truth they deserved to know? The question gnawed at me, especially at night. I'd lie awake, replaying his smug voice in my head. If you don't accept the 5, you get nothing. It wasn't just about money. It was about the insult, the way he looked down on me like I was a fool. Maybe I had accepted the 5 then, but I sure as hell wasn't the fool now. One evening, I ran into him in the lobby. He avoided my eyes, clutching a bag of groceries like it was a shield. I almost said something, almost reminded him of those dents still in the doorframe. But I didn't. I realized that silence was sharper than words. My very presence was enough to remind him of his failure. So I decided on a middle path. I wouldn't go out of my way to stir the pot, but I also wouldn't protect him from the consequences of his own choices. If I saw something worth sharing, I'd share it. If someone asked me what happened, I'd tell them the truth. No embellishments, no exaggerations. Just facts. And facts, In this case, were damning enough. Still, I wondered how far this would go. A man can take only so much before he either changes or collapses completely. And judging by his stubbornness, I doubted he would ever change. Which meant only one thing. His collapse wasn't over yet. The hardest part wasn't deciding whether to act. It was deciding how much satisfaction to take in watching it all unfold. For a while, it looked like things had settled. The gossip in the group chat slowed down. People had vented their anger, management had issued fines, and the trashed apartment sat locked and silent like a tombstone to his reputation. The landlord started keeping his head down, walking quickly through the lobby, barely saying a word to anyone. Part of me thought, that's it. It's over. He'd taken his punishment. He'd lost his money, his pride, and his standing with the neighbors. Maybe, just maybe, he would learn something from it. For a moment, I even felt a flicker of relief. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life thinking about him. I just wanted peace. Then I heard the rumor. Someone mentioned that he was planning to make it all back by finding new tenants willing to pay more. Office workers, they said, maybe even a small business desperate for cheap space. The idea made my stomach twist. After everything, he hadn't learned a thing. He wasn't trying to rebuild trust. He was trying to squeeze another quick buck. I brushed it off at first. Rumors spread fast in buildings like ours, and not all of them were true. But a week later, I saw men in suits inspecting the apartment. They walked through the lobby with clipboards, shaking their heads at the broken furniture and vandalized walls. The landlord trailed behind them, smiling nervously, pointing out potential. I almost laughed. Potential? The place looked like a battlefield. Yet there he was, trying to pitch it like it was prime real estate. For a brief second, I thought he might pull it off. People get desperate, and desperate people make bad decisions. If someone signed that lease, he would be back in business. But that's the thing about false resolutions, they never last. Within days, the building management stepped in again. They reminded him, in no uncertain terms, that he didn't have permission to operate an office there. Not legally, not technically, not in any way. His little sales pitch died before it even started. The men in suits never came back. I remember watching him from my balcony that night. He stood outside smoking, pacing like a man trapped in his own cage. For a moment, he looked almost human, not smug, not arrogant, just beaten. I thought maybe this was the turning point, that he would finally give up on his schemes. But deep down, I knew better. Men like him don't stop because they learn a lesson. They stop because they run out of options. And judging by the look in his eyes, he wasn't out of options yet. The storm had quieted, but the air still felt heavy. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. The calm didn't last long. In a building like ours, silence is never permanent. It's only the pause before the next round of noise. And sure enough, trouble came knocking again, this time louder than before. It started with the smell. A sour, rotten stench drifting through the hallways. At first, people thought it was the trash chute backing up, but soon we traced it back to his apartment. He had locked it up after the failed office pitch, but he hadn't bothered to clean anything out. Food left to rot, garbage piling up, leaky bags staining the floors. The place wasn't just empty, it was decaying. Tenants complained. Families with kids couldn't stand walking by his door. Management received report after report. And when they finally forced the door open, the scene was worse than anyone imagined. Mold crawling up the walls, broken cabinets stacked like firewood, graffiti still glaring back at anyone who entered. It wasn't just an abandoned unit anymore. It was a hazard. The building group chat exploded again. Pictures, videos, furious comments. The same flood as before, but angrier this time. Why should we live like this? One man wrote. He's dragging down the whole building, another added. Neighbors who had once ignored him were now actively demanding action. And then came the kicker, the authorities. With the mounting complaints and the unsanitary conditions, officials were called in. Not only did they confirm the violations already on his record, they added new ones. Failure to maintain a safe property, creating health risks, degrading common areas. Each violation came with another fine, another black mark on his name. For the landlord, it was a nightmare. But for the rest of us, it was almost poetic. He had tried to cut corners for years, squeezing every yuan he could from tenants while refusing to lift a finger for real maintenance. Now those same neglected corners had turned into a trap, and he was caught squarely inside it. I watched him in the lobby one afternoon after the inspection. He stood in front of the elevator, shoulders hunched, phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried, sharp and desperate. I can't pay that much. No, I said I'll get the money. Just give me time. He didn't realize I was standing just a few feet away. I didn't say a word, but I couldn't help thinking. So this is what greed buys. Not wealth, not respect, just endless begging for more time. The complication wasn't just about fines or repairs anymore. It was about survival. He had reached the point where every choice cost him more than the last. And the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. We all knew it then. The man who once thought he held power over tenants was now completely powerless. And the worst was yet to come. If you've ever watched a man unravel, you know it doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single loud crash. It's a slow collapse, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the shell of who he used to be. That's exactly what happened to my landlord. By the time the new round of fines landed on his doorstep, he was already a ghost of the smug man I once faced across the kitchen table. The neighbors no longer looked at him with irritation. They looked at him with pity, the kind reserved for someone who had lost a fight long before the bell rang. He stopped showing up at the lobby altogether. His wife, once the queen bee of the building's mothers group, vanished from sight as well. The same woman who used to organize events now avoided eye contact in the grocery store. It was as if the entire family had gone into hiding. The darkest moment came one night when I passed the trash area outside. There he was, digging through old paint cans and broken tools, muttering under his breath. He was looking for scraps, anything he could salvage to patch up his apartment without paying for real repairs. I froze, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. The man who once took thousands from tenants was now reduced to scavenging through garbage just to keep the lights on. Inside the building chat, things only got worse. Videos surfaced of the trashed unit leaking foul water into the hallway, stains spreading across the shared floors. Parents threatened to move out if management didn't act. One resident wrote, "If this isn't fixed, I'll sue the building." And everyone knew exactly who was to blame. I could have stayed silent. I could have let the storm blow past me. But then I remembered the look on his face when he shoved 5,000 into my hand and told me to take it or leave it. That arrogance had cost me money, sleep, and trust. And now, watching him dig through trash, I realized just how far he had fallen. The building management finally issued the ultimate blow. Until all fines were paid, until every violation was cleared, he was banned from renting out or renovating the apartment. He had no income, no way to fix the place, and no credibility left among the residents. For a landlord, that was death. Standing there, watching him shuffle back to his ruined unit with nothing but a cracked bucket and a rusted hammer, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because pity doesn't erase the past. And some lessons, especially the ones paid for in greed, can only be learned the hard way. The final blow didn't come with shouting or fists. It came with paperwork. Cold, official, impossible to argue against. Word spread fast that the building management, together with local authorities, had moved to lock his unit. Not just ban him from renting it out, lock it entirely. Notices were plastered across the door. Unpaid fines, repeated violations, health risks. To anyone passing by, it looked less like an apartment and more like a crime scene sealed off for investigation. I stood there the morning they posted the papers, along with half the building. Neighbors gathered quietly, some whispering, some shaking their heads. Nobody offered sympathy. Nobody defended him. For years, he had taken from us, cheated us, smiled smugly while pocketing deposits. Now, stripped of income and reputation, he was left with nothing but a ruined apartment he couldn't even enter. The confrontation wasn't physical, but it was brutal. He tried to argue with the officials, waving his hands, demanding a chance to fix things. They didn't even flinch. One officer simply pointed to the long list of violations taped to the door and walked away. It was the kind of dismissal that cuts deeper than any insult. That night, I saw him again in the lobby. He didn't avoid me this time. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in over a decade, there was no arrogance, no smirk, just defeat. He muttered something under his breath, maybe an apology, maybe a curse. I couldn't tell. And honestly, I didn't care. Because the truth was simple. He had taken a month and a half of my rent. And in return, he lost a year's worth of income, the respect of 500 neighbors, and any shred of authority he once had as a landlord. The building chat lit up that evening. Residents shared their satisfaction, some even toasting over dinner, calling it karma, calling it justice. For me, it was quieter than that. I didn't need cheers or congratulations. Just walking past that sealed door was enough. There was no need for revenge plots or grand confrontations. He had written his own, ending the moment. He chose greed over fairness. And the ending was now carved into the walls of that apartment. Dents, scratches, graffiti, all untouched, all preserved as a monument to his downfall. Standing there, I thought back to the day he shoved that envelope into my hand and told me, "Take it or leave it." He thought he'd won, but in the end, the only thing he took was his own dignity, and he left behind everything else. It's been years since all that happened, but every time I pass by that sealed unit, I'm reminded of how quickly greed can turn into a noose. The door still carries the scars of his arrogance, the dents in the frame, the scratches on the furniture he swore cost him thousands, the faint graffiti that no coat of paint ever covered. It isn't just an apartment anymore. It's a cautionary tale. For me, life moved on. I settled into my new place in the same building, built my own routine, and stopped worrying about what the landlord was up to. But the story never really left the hallways. New tenants came, heard the whispers, and learned the lesson before they ever met him. His name became shorthand for dishonesty, a reminder that no matter how clever you think you are, people always find out. Sometimes neighbors ask me if I regret not fighting harder for my deposit back. Should I have hired a lawyer? Should I have pushed back right then and there instead of walking away with only a fraction of what I was owed? Maybe, but when I think about how it all turned out, I don't see myself as the one who lost. I lost a month and a half's rent. He lost everything else. And that's the part men my age understand better than most. Money comes and goes. We've all been shortchanged, all been cheated once or twice. But reputation, that's the real currency. Once people stop trusting you, you can't buy it back. You can't fake it, and you sure as hell can't bully your way into earning it again. He thought he was smart, shaving off deposits here and there, convincing himself no one would notice. But over time, those little cheats stacked up until the entire building saw him for what he was. And when that moment came, no amount of smooth talking or quick cash could save him. I don't hate him anymore. Truth is, I don't even think about him much. But when I do, it's not anger I feel. It's clarity. He taught me a lesson without even meaning to. A man who sacrifices honor for pocket change ends up with neither. So if you ask me what became of my landlord, I'd say this. He's still around, somewhere in the city, probably still chasing shortcuts and easy money. But in this building, in these walls, his story is finished. His downfall isn't written in court papers or bank accounts. It's written in the silence that follows when his name is mentioned. And that silence, more than anything else, is the justice he earned. Stories like this stay with you, not because of the money lost, but because of the lesson learned. My landlord thought he was clever, keeping a few thousand here and there. But what he didn't realize is that every time he cheated someone, he was digging his own grave. In the end, he didn't just lose income. He lost trust, dignity, and the respect of everyone around him. For me, it was never about revenge. It was about letting time do its work. Sometimes the harshest punishment isn't what you do to someone. It's what they do to themselves. And watching it unfold was more satisfying than any courtroom battle could have been. If you've ever been cheated, lied to, or underestimated, you know how it feels to carry that weight. And maybe you also know the quiet satisfaction of seeing karma finally arrive. That's why I share these stories. Because every one of us has lived through something like this. And sometimes, the best way to move forward is to hear how others found justice. If you want more stories like this one, stick around. There are plenty more lessons, and plenty more downfalls, worth telling.